and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as always, we are exclusive to the PAUK Radio Network. I'm joined tonight by my lovely co-hosts, Richard Clements and Kerry Greenaway.
Hello.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
I thought I'd shake it up this week and do it the other way around.
Shake it up, yeah. Moving and a shaking, yeah. Well, yeah. I suppose it was my birthday, wasn't it? Oh, did I say that?
It was.
Oh, you did. Happy birthday.
Oh, well, thank you very much, guys. Yeah, I had a lovely time.
Good. That's what you can't, isn't it, eh?
Well,
and you got my card.
Yes, I did actually. Yes.
Optimism Octopus.
Yeah. Is that what you think?
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll be able to celebrate it a bit more soon, hopefully, because we'll be able to get out and about a bit more, hopefully.
Yeah, and then we can go and give you the bumps.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
When he's lost the weight, when he's lost the weight.
When I've lost the weight and when I sort of get rid of this the lockdown paunch, which I'm sure most of us have got.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's fine. Cool. So other than your birthday, Richard, what have you been up to this week?
Not a lot, really. I've been sort of concentrating on doing a little bit of exercise. I've been going on some nice long walks and I've been taking my new birthday present out, my bicycle.
Okay.
So I'm doing a bit of, I cycle one day, walk the next. So, just trying to mix it up a bit as much as you can and trying to eat a bit more sort of healthily as well. I'm on a bit of a fruit binge at the moment. So, yes, I'm sort of getting reacquainted with bananas, nectarines, apples, all the good things.
Okay, excellent. And, okay, so all the fans of the show, they can keep an eye out for you on the roads in your Lycra. And you might just stop.
I've got a Lycra top, actually. And I went shopping today, and I had my big coat on because I thought it was going to be cold outside, but it wasn't. And I was sort of like sweating a bit, and I had my rucksack, so I went in the shop, got my stuff, but I had to take my coat off, and I was sort of like walking through the precinct, quite self-conscious with this, with my Lycra. It's all right from the shoulders to the bottom of the chest, but then it all went a bit to pot from there.
And Kerry, how have you been?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Yeah, good.
Good. Been up to much other than work?
Crystals.
I know. See you do a live Saturday.
Today.
Or Sunday. Oh, was it
Sunday? Yeah, today. Yeah.
Okay. I know you've done one at some stage.
Yeah, sorry, it was Sunday. Not today. Soz everybody. My brain hasn't caught up with life yet. Yeah, then.
I think it's going to be one of those shows.
Oh, I think it could be.
It is. So where are we going this week?
Well, we're delving into the second major war of the world, World War II, this week, following the last week's show of World War One. So we're going to have a look at World War II this week. And in the middle of all of this, we've just had VE Day.
We have.
Yes, my birthday.
Yeah. So it's kind of a fitting time to do these shows, I feel.
Yes.
Oh, of course, yes, certainly.
Which is quite good planning on my part, I'm going to say.
Our part, I think that was.
Sorry, our part. Yeah, I know, right? Oh,
yeah.
World War II, the second major war of the world. Oh, guys, you're going to have to help me out tonight, I feel, because my brain really isn't engaged. Now, there's quite a lot of paranormal stories surrounding World War II. In fact, I would say we tend to get more regarding World War II. Firstly, I think it's because it's like in more recent memory. And secondly, I think we still investigate places that are World War II linked, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, you think about it. I mean, one of the most popular places to sort of investigate, particularly here in the UK, seems to be abandoned and ex-airfields.
Exactly. And they're quite accessible, these airfields, that we can go and investigate. Quite interesting. And also, we get I think what's interesting about that is we get quite a lot of different nationalities. So, like, because World War One was not fought on British soil, and it was all sort of like transported over. Whereas World War Two, there are a lot of prep work and the airfields and stuff like that stationed not just UK people, but Canadians, Americans, foreign nationals.
Yes,
Over
that's
here, we
right.
even had German world prisoner of war camps, and we had a lot more go on here in England than we did in World War One. World War One was very removed. It felt very removed. It was always abroad, whereas
Yeah,
World War Two crossed the channel with regards to the impact it had.
of course.
That you could witness on the street. You walk down the street and you see soldiers and stuff like that. So, it very much is more impactful. And I mean, I know a lot of the older people are now passing, but I grew up with my nan and granddad talking about the war. You know what I mean? Us 50 pluses, we had relatives that fought in the war.
That's correct. My parents were children during the war, and I can remember sort of like my aunts and uncles. Well, particularly my uncles actually did fight during the war. So yeah, so I was brought up having first-hand accounts of it, and it's never really sort of left me. And I sort of, and even today, I still feel, even though it's 80 years, I still feel that World War Two is quite close to me. It's quite close to my heart, really.
Because it's within your family, within that
Yeah.
generational,
Mm.
situation. Like my granddad fought in World War Two. My nan was a nurse in World War Two. That's how they met, actually. So for me, it's quite relevant too. You know what I mean? Because I remember my granddad. He very rarely spoke about the bad side of the war. I'd hear the funny stories of the
Yeah.
war, not the bad side of it, really. So, but I remember him talking about that. Well, whenever I asked him, he'd tell me the funny stories, make me laugh. But yeah, it was those sort of things that was relevant. You know what I mean? And we've got those memories which we didn't have from World War One.
That's right. I mean, World War One seems, you look at it now, and it does seem like a real historic conflict. You would put the World War One alongside sort of things like the Napoleonic War and the sort of like the Crimean War. It's sort of, it's receded enough back in history to be what and what I would call history.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Now, in World War Two, we had planes were a lot more prevalent. Mechanical devices, shall we say, were a lot more prevalent. We had evolved that to quite a big degree. So we had like the Battle of Britain and stuff like that. We all remember that. Very iconic. When you look at air shows these days, you've got the Spitfires, the old warplanes. They do a flyby, and they're very evocative, aren't they? When you hear a Spitfire, you can tell. Even now, the Lancaster bombers, all of those kind of things, the Hercules, we kind of know, even now, what those planes are, because they are in air shows and stuff like that. When the royal family have flybys, they tend to do a Spitfire flyby. And they're very evocative, aren't they? And this is all coming out of World War Two.
Oh yes, I mean the Battle of Britain flight. Yeah, I mean those aircraft are looked after really well, and plus there's still quite a few Spitfires in private hands, and they sort of join in as well. I mean it can be quite an impressive sight when you see them, and as you say, Kerry, it's very evocative. I don't think anyone sort of if a Spitfire goes over, you can hear it coming.
Yeah.
B, you all run outside, have a look, it will fly overhead, and you think, yeah, that is it. It's really quite stirring.
It is. I still think, yeah, it is. Sorry, Paul.
I was going to say, I do actually know that they did have a pink Spitfire, and they used it for reconnaissance, and they'd fly it so high you couldn't see it, essentially, and it'd fly over all the places they wanted to photograph, and they'd photograph from the pink Spitfire.
Yeah, the reconnaissance one, yeah, because pink wouldn't show up, and it's like I heard of them. They used to camouflage desert Land Rovers and sort of some sort of like vehicles in a pink because they won't show up in the heat haze of the desert either.
No.
Well, yeah.
So we have a time in a war situation where we have a lot more mechanical sort of devices, and it wasn't just fought on land, it was also fought on sea.
Oh, yeah.
It was like everywhere, the air, the land, the sea. It was a totally encompassing battle. Supply lines were disrupted because we couldn't get the supplies over because they kept being bloody torpedoed. Because we're an island, we import a lot of stuff, and that was one of the ways the Germans could make us suffer, as it were, is disrupt our supply lines in.
Yeah, but look who suffered in the end.
Well, it's even that. It's a close run thing. Very close run thing. And that was the only thing that Winston Churchill, after the war, admitted to. He said, the U-boat threat did worry me. And there wasn't a lot that worried that man.
No, they kind of were like, and I no disrespect to our troops that fought, our own troops, they kind of were the king of the seas, the U-boats, weren't they?
Oh yeah, they had the advantages of stealth, and they used to hunt in wolf packs, and and once a couple of those got in amongst the convoys, because the convoy system was the only system we had that was sort of, it wasn't ideal, but it was the only system we had to actually get the supplies over, was to move them over in large convoys, and they were just like a magnet for the U-boats. And we lost a lot of men, not just military personnel, and a lot of civilian personnel, sort of merchant seamen during the North Atlantic conflict.
Well, the Germans were the kings of the sea, we were the kings of the sky, and you cannot deny that our Air Force, although it was in its very early days back then, the challenge, we outstripped them in the sky, didn't we?
Yes, it was sort of, the Germans were quite at the start, about 1940, the German Luftwaffe was sort of on par with the Royal Air Force, but then the Battle of Britain came, and it was a close run thing, but the Germans did make a few mistakes during the Battle of Britain. They switched from bombing airfields to bombing London, and that was a bit of a mistake. They should have kept on bombing the airfields, because it was that sort of switch the Luftwaffe made that gave the RAF the breathing space to sort of get more aircraft back into service and into conflict. So, it again, and it was another close run thing, but sort of luck was on our side during the Battle of Britain.
It wasn't luck, it was God.
I think it was the testament to the flyers.
It was God.
The pilots.
It was God. God was on our side, like he was in World War One.
Okay, if you want to go with that.
I'm going with that.
Okay, we'll go with that. If that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine by me. Right, so when did World War II start?
1939. About September is when we entered the war.
So we go into this discussion, shall we say, regarding World War II, with the backdrop of quite a lot of different things going on, don't we?
Well, yes, we do. Yeah, we hadn't long sort of like been out of the Great sort of like Depression, and the 1930s were actually quite a turbulent time. Sort of Spain. There was a war going on in Spain, which had only just ended, the Spanish Civil War. So there was a lot of knocking sort of going about, and fascism was on the rise throughout continental Europe, and even the UK had quite a large fascist party. So it was very interesting times, and we hadn't long been out of the great sort of like the depression, the crash of the late 1920s, early 30s. And it is true what they say, to get you out of a recession, there's nothing like a war. To kick everything back into sort of normality again. But the 1930s, if anyone wants to go and study, and I'd recommend studying that sort of period, not just sort of military, but also what was going on sort of in civilian life as well.
You do have to look at the political landscape. We've said this before in regards to why wars kick off in the first place, but we're not going to go into that tonight. We've covered that on previous shows. If you go and check out our Nazis and the Occult show, it will give you a good broad understanding of how that war kicked off. That's available over on Paranormal Concept on Spreaker if you want to check that out, or on our YouTube channel, because we have one of those too. Now, let's have a look at the paranormal side of things, because there are paranormal stories, and there's a very famous one that came out, and it also involves the Witchcraft Act. So we're going to take a look at this one first. Now, this involves a ship, one of the sea. It's a ship. Oh, God, Kel. I mean, obviously, it's on the sea. It's a ship,
well,
right?
Where else?
Well, it could be an airship.
It could be an airship. No,
Oh,
but we're actually talking.
Lordy Lord.
They had them in
ship
World
that
War
floats
Two.
on water.
Oh, dearie me. Right, this was the afternoon of November the 25th in 1941. It had been relatively quiet. There was 1,350 men on board, and it was a battleship called the HMS Barham. But everything had been fine. Everything was very quiet. It was sailing around off the coast of Egypt and was actually providing gun cover for cruisers on the hunt for Axis ships that were going to North Africa. So they were plodding around looking for these ships, thinking, it's all going swimmingly. And basically, a German U-boat torpedo struck the battleship. Two more followed quite quickly after that, and the 643-foot Barham rolled to its port side. Now, crew members on the convoy's other battleships, which were the Valiant and the Queen Elizabeth, were helpless. They couldn't do anything to help. It was just... It's like a sniper attack by this U-boat on the Barham. Okay.
Yeah, and it was quite a shock for the Royal Navy, because they didn't think German U-boats were operating in the area, so they weren't really taking much sort of like precaution against them. And it managed to get. And the HMS Barham was a big battleship. It was one of our key battleships, and for that to go down, not good news.
No, and of course the Valiant.
Look at Richard giving away all our secrets.
I know, right?
No, don't give them ideas.
But those two ships themselves, the Valiant and the Queen Elizabeth, are then on like high alert, because they now know somewhere under the water there's a German U-boat. So there's not a lot they can do to help this ship. Now, on the Barham, 4-inch magazines, and several of these were actually on fire. So you've got a massive fire going on. The blaze spread. It moved to the main 15-inch magazines, and that caused a massive, big explosion amidship. Now, you can imagine the confusion of this, and that's it. That's enough to sink the ship, basically. So although they'd been hit by a tornado, it was actually the ammunition on board that kind of made it
was the main magazine, and that was actually filmed at the time. And if you want to look that up on YouTube, it is quite spectacular, the explosion. You can see the ship on its side and the main magazine exploding, and it is quite something. I'll share it with you guys after the show, but it is...
We'll share that to our social media page
as well. Yeah.
4 minutes and 35 seconds after the torpedo had first struck the Barham, the battleship actually had sunk. 488 men were saved, but 862 died.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the ship's complement.
Which is horrendous, isn't it? When you think about it. Now, British intelligence knew that the German army and the High Command were unaware of the Barham's fate. News hadn't got back yet.
Right.
Okay. The British wanted to keep it that way. At the time, we had German bombs raining down on England. We had the raid earlier in 1941 on Portsmouth. That was on the naval base there. That killed 171. So the British people were still reeling from that. Mm-hmm. And so they were worried that this And they did class it as a major German victory over the Navy.
It would have been. Yeah, a capital ship like the Barham, yes, it would have been a major victory for the Germans.
It would affect the military and civilian morale a lot more. So they wanted to keep this very, very quiet. So the Admiralty basically blocked, clamped down all reports about the Barham. They put a worldwide sort of like dampener on it. They just kept it very, very quiet. They even delayed telling family members for several weeks about the death of loved ones. Right? They went to great lengths on this to keep this quiet. It was Christmas, so over the Christmas and New Year period, they sent messages, from people that had died to families.
Yeah, that's quite something, really, isn't it?
Just to keep up the pretense.
To keep, just basically, well, you can't be dead because, I got a message at Christmas. Anything to keep this news from being put out there, basically. The Admiralty, once they had notified the family, they asked them to keep the deaths of their loved ones a very close secret. Official acknowledgement of the sinking would not be made public until the January the 27th in 1942. Yeah. That's a long time afterwards.
Yeah.
However, it didn't quite keep it totally under wraps. Now, this is quite a famous case because a famous medium named Helen Duncan spoke of Barham's End during a séance in Portsmouth. Right? Now, she had already reported the capture of another loss. Right, she'd already reported the HMS Hood. So she's done 2 now, and the Admiralty are now going, we can't afford on any level for any information like this to be getting out. It's Official Secrets Act, effectively. Because of the way the war's going, we need to keep this under wraps. So they turned their attention on Helen Duncan, want to know how and why she got to know this information.
Well, they would, wouldn't they? Because logically, you'd think, well, is she a spy?
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's got to be the first sort of thing they turn to. She is privy to top secret information. Yeah. Yeah.
Which the Germans, other than us, the Germans will be the ones that knew.
Exactly. So we've got to, so from a war perspective, we'll say this, quite innocently, just doing her readings, having her seances, living her life, you know what I mean? But this is becoming a national problem because if a spy or somebody got in there and heard the news, they'd be like, wow, However that comes forward to the public domain, they needed to keep it under wraps.
Yeah, I've heard this story about Helen Duncan. I didn't realise she foretold HMS Hood as well. That's interesting because,
get her to sign the Official Secrets Act.
She wouldn't be able to do her public seances then, would she?
Yeah, that's right.
That's not their problem, is it? She's divulging information about the military. She should have kept that mouth shut on that bit.
Well, she's giving messages from loved ones. And if somebody who's passed comes through and they were on one of these poor ships, then she doesn't know that. She's just giving the message over.
No, but she could just turn around to the spirit and just go, look, mate, Official Secrets Act, you should understand, I can't say that yet. Come back in 4 months.
Difficult one. If she was real, if she didn't know the information beforehand.
Yeah, taking it at face value.
Taking it on face value. But let's have a look at her. Let's have a look at Helen Duncan, because she's a very famous character in the old paranormal world, which is very famous in regards to Harry Price and the ectoplasm photographs. Very, very... I don't even know how to explain it. Farcical, I think, is the expression on that one. Anyway, let's take a little look at lovely little Helen Duncan. She was actually born in Callender.
We'll go with Callender.
Callender, Scotland, isn't it? Yeah.
In wee bonny Scotland. In 1897, she was born Victoria Helen McRae McFarlane. Now, there's a name.
Absolutely.
Yep.
She was fourth of 8 children, big family. She claimed by the age of 7 that spirits of the dead visited her. So from a very young age, she was saying that she could talk to the dead. But the family itself was actually very involved with clairvoyance and said that they had similar powers. So this is like something in the family. It's not something unusual. She would have grown up around this, this spiritualism talk.
Yeah, that's right. So, she was surrounded by it by the sounds of it. So it's all, yeah.
Now, her parents didn't discourage her from talking about what she was seeing and receiving. They did urge her not to discuss them outside the family, saying that there were people that would take advantage of her, which is probably true. But this girl is she's not a weak and feeble child. She is a feisty one, shall we say. Very strong-willed, very boisterous, and basically she earned herself the nickname of Hellish Nell. I
don't want to cross her on a dark night.
No, you do not want to cross her. She is a very, very strong-willed lady. At 16, she, dearish me, she actually became pregnant out of wedlock. Very naughty back then. And her parents then turned their backs on her. She was sent away disgraced. She moved to Dundee on the east coast of Scotland. She had a stint in a sanatorium for tuberculosis. Then she took a job at the Dundee Royal Infirmary. And in 1915, she had her first child, which was a girl. Congratulations,
Hooray.
Helen.
Or Hellish Nell.
Or Hellish Nell, as whoever wants, Anyway, the next year, in 1916, she met and married Henry Duncan, who was a co-worker's brother. It was a local man. Now, Henry himself had been dismissed from the army for rheumatic fever, so he was not a particularly well man himself. And I can imagine, when I read about this, but this man, I kind of see him as, you get these really strong women and the really kind of weak husband.
Yes, I should imagine it's like a George and Mildred setup.
Yes. Yes, I remember that series. Yes, that's how I see this kind of relationship. Now he was ill quite a lot throughout his life. And basically both of them were very transient in jobs because of illness, basically.
Right.
She was often sick, he was often sick. Having said that, she did have 6 children.
Well, yeah. Well, I obviously didn't have a telly back then, did they?
One wonders. No, I'm not even going to go down that thought pattern. No. Anyway, obviously, money problems festered the family. So, Henry had started a furniture company that had failed. Helen was working at a bleach factory, all hard physical jobs. Then Henry had a heart attack. His working days were done. He couldn't work anymore. And so Helen becomes the sole breadwinner for a family of 8.
8? Could you imagine?
Bless her.
Yeah.
This is where her independence and feisty personality probably served her well.
Yeah. She seems... Well, she must be quite a tough old bird, as they say.
You'd have to be, wouldn't you?
You would do.
Now, Henry also had spiritualistic leanings, shall we say. He was very interested in it, but he didn't have any skills, but realised quite quickly that Helen's abilities, shall we say, could be a way that helped with their money problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, makes sense, doesn't it?
So, in 1926, she was still working at the bleach factory during the day and then started holding famous, or infamous, shall we say, seances during the evening.
Right.
Sidekick. A side hustle, shall we say.
Yeah, just a little, sort of to earn a bit of extra money on the side. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people have second jobs.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. Now, she's quite theatrical. She plays to the crowd quite easily. She, is a performance. But we've said this about Victorian post-Victorian spiritualism. It became a piece of theatre, a piece of entertainment, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And she's working with this remit, as it were, a bit like the TV shows have given us a sort of blueprint for paranormal investigations. Victorian spiritualism gave them a blueprint for seances. Now, before the seance, what she would do is invite several female audience members to the back room. She would strip naked and twirl on their demand to prove she wasn't hiding anything on her body. She would then dress in black silk. She would sit in a wooden cabinet that Henry had made. Nice of Henry, thank you very much. And he said it claimed to help harness her power.
Right.
We get a red bulb glowing. That gives us the eerie kind of feeling about it all. Casting her in a red light in this box with her black silk must have been quite a spooky scenario back in the day.
Yeah. So, you can see that everything you would imagine a classic seance to be, you could say sort of stems from Helen and before, really, because, I would, the cabinet in the side of the room, with a little curtain across. Yeah, I can see it.
Now, within this scenario, she entered a trance state, and eventually a gauzy white substance would spill from her mouth. That announced the arrival of a spirit. And an airy white figure would float into view and move around her. Apparently, these were her spirit guides, who spoke through the medium and helped her summon forth the dearly departed.
Right.
It's a very piece of great theatre going on here, isn't there? Now, her voice did change depending on who was being channeled through. You can imagine that she comes from Scotland. She's got a very broad... She's got a very distinct voice. Yeah, she's got a strong accent, but she's also got quite a harsh voice when you hear her speak. Now, when she had her spirit guides come through, her voice apparently was a lot softer, easier to understand. So it was her accent softened. She wasn't as strong in her accent. And apparently, one of her spirit guides was even a child. So her voice perceptibly changed.
So she had quite a range,
She did.
Yeah.
Some would argue a good actress could have done that.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
You know what I mean? It doesn't take much to learn to speak in a different voice, does it?
Well, no. Just look at the people who work for The Simpsons, like Nancy Cartwright, for example. Her character's a child boy, and she's an adult female.
Well, yeah, true.
So it's easily to do, isn't it?
Yeah, we've seen actors over many different films do it. Many Americans try English accents and vice versa.
Yeah.
Don't always be successful at it, but it's practice, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Now, in 1928, Helen agreed to let the photographer Harvey Metcalf use flash photography to catch the white substance, this ectoplasm that emerged from her body. Now, did she think about this? Did she think that people would maybe find something that they, it's a funny one, right? She allows this guy to photograph her. It could work either way. It could either prove people's minds that she was the real deal, or the skeptics are going to come out the woodwork and call her out and say, well, that's obviously faked. Do you know what I mean? But she did. However,
they are very famous photographs, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I know the ones you're talking about, and I'll post some of those up on the page as well when the show goes out, and just to let the audience have a look at them.
Yeah. Now, Harvey Metcalf himself discovered that it was actually her ability to regurgitate muslin that she had swallowed previously. But it didn't do her any harm. Her seances continued to be very successful. Even some skeptics in the audience who grabbed these alleged entities that were supposed to be floating around her spirit guide, like manifestations, and found that they were papier-mâché heads with cloth bodies. Even after people had done that, she still remained really popular.
I thought she was holding the cloths up and with a ladle in her hand to push it up in the middle,
Yeah, possibly, yeah. It does seem bizarre, doesn't it?
That's my dead uncle floating around there. Look.
Yeah.
But she still remains incredibly popular. All this skepticism and proof base out fake is not doing anything to damage her career or her seances. She even allowed the London Spiritualist Alliance to examine her ectoplasm. They showed that she'd added egg whites to the muslin to make it slimy. Again, true believers didn't actually care. They still turned up.
To be fair, we get that sort of thing in the paranormal as well, because you've got these so-called paranormal teams out there that do fake stuff, and no matter how much you say to people, look, what they're doing is fake, they've admitted it, or do you know what I mean? Or you've got evidence to prove that they're doing fake stuff, people still believe.
Yes.
Well, yes. I mean, nowadays it's more being taken over by sort of videos and Photoshop. But you've got to remember back then, this would be the first time that people would have seen anything like this.
But I think you also have to look at the time period she's doing this in. You've come.
It's a very uncertain time period.
Exactly,
yes,
because you're in you're in the 1920s and early 1930s when this is going on. You've just come off the back of a massive world war. People need comfort.
Yeah, and they're looking for answers. And despite how absurd it seems now, and even then, I mean, there's still a percentage of the public, the gullible public they call them, will be willing to go and believe this or want to believe it.
And I think it's not only that, but people are into the strange and unusual.
Yes.
And that's what makes this interesting for a lot of people. And even as far back as like P.T. Barnum, although it's not into the whole spiritual world, he had like the original freak show type thing.
Yeah.
It's just the strange and unusual that people are drawn to.
And we saw then that even though he got proved fake, people then
everyone went to see.
It regenerated a load of people to go back to see it, to see how he faked it.
And you can see
that mermaid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can see possibly, she was called out for being a fake on many occasions, and so that will get a new crowd in to go and see and how she does it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then P.T. Barnum done a movie, didn't he? Like The Greatest Showman, and he's like revived his career.
He'd be very proud.
You would, absolutely. Everyone knows him now.
Everyone still knows Helen Duncan.
Exactly.
Well, in the paranormal field. Well, a lot of people know who she is, even without the paranormal field.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so it becomes a thorn to skeptics, but very popular to her audience.
Yeah.
And she carried on.
It's the audience that matters.
And it's the paying public. Yeah, the paying public that matters. Nothing else matters, really.
Exactly.
Now, she carried on doing seances, and in 1941, her demonstrations in Portsmouth finally made the military focus their attentions on her. In late May of that year, a Brigadier Roy C. Firebrace attended one of Helen's seances. She was actually speaking in the voice of Albert, who was one of her regular spirit guides. She said to those who were in front of her that a British battleship had just been sunk. Now, the Brigadier was like, what?
Okay.
I don't know of this.
Mm-hmm.
So he went away and he checked with members of the Royal Navy. Nobody had heard of anything about a ship going down. Right? But the next morning, he found out that the HMS Hood had been sunk the day before during the Battle of the Denmark Strait.
Yes, and you know what ship sunk HMS Hood? The Bismarck.
Oh,
that would be something, yeah. And again, HMS Hood, a capital ship.
Yeah.
That was the flagship of the Royal Navy at the time. And they wouldn't have wanted news of that getting out. It seems, and Helen Duncan here, she seems to sort of issue a premonition. I think she sort of, like, reading the research and stuff, it sort of looks like she sort of second guesses it before it actually happens, because it did happen on the early morning when it was actually sunk.
But she didn't name it. She just said that a British battleship had been
Battleship,
sunk.
yeah.
You know, so you could argue that she either was very good at like maybe she did have precog on
Yeah.
that. Maybe she did, have an honest ability. She just theatred it up with the ectoplasm and the seances and stuff like that. Who knows? I mean, she must have had something good because word spreads. And if you're getting messages from loved ones, you go to a spiritualist evening and someone's giving messages up on the platform and everybody's going, no, 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 no. You
Yeah.
don't recommend them. Whereas like if someone's going, you go to one and everything the person says you can take, and everybody else, word spreads, it becomes like, oh my God, she was really good. You need to go to one of the seances. Oh my God. Do you know what I
You
mean?
need to go and see her.
Yeah. Even if she is using the Barnum effect effectively. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Generalisation. We don't know. But
I
anyway,
mean, during war, a battleship's been sunk. That's not too much of a leap, is it? I mean, and anyone can say that. I mean, you're bound to be right or wrong, aren't you?
at some point you would think,
Yeah.
wouldn't you? Having said that, she's now got the attention of the
Yeah.
military. She's now got, like, Brigadier is now going, right, how the hell did she know that?
Yeah.
Right? Now, months later, at a seance just after the Barham had sunk, but before it was public knowledge, Helen's spirit guide told the audience that he was in contact with a dead sailor. The sailor had a message for a woman in the audience. He was her son and he had died in the sinking. She didn't know, the woman in the audience didn't know that her son had been killed against the Barnum. So she contacted the Admiralty afterwards and said, here, I had a message from this spiritualist. She said that my son's dead. What's going on? Right? Now, obviously, the Admiralty at this point is still trying to control the fact of this news. They're still trying to control the story. So you've got to remember now, it's like, oh my God, this medium has just said this. Oh my God. Do you know what I mean? And linked it to the right ship because of the person that was supposed to have come through at the seance.
This sounds more compelling. She's got the name of the ship, an individual talking to the relative, the mother of the person in the audience. That is quite compelling stuff.
Exactly.
If true.
Exactly. So alarm bells are ringing all over the place on this one.
I'd love to have been in the Admiralty during that and sort of and how they were sort of like reacting to this news.
I would think after HMS Hood, I think what they probably would have done was dismissed it.
Yeah.
As a coincidence, lucky guess. Nothing was tangible about that.
Yeah.
However, this one's more specific. So they've got this that had happened a few years before, and now they've got the Barham. They're now going, hold on a goddamn minute. This is difficult. We've got to control this. Even if she's fake, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's fake or not.
Loose lips sink ships, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And don't forget, there was a big propaganda about talking to people and passing news on. There was a big propaganda in the UK about be careful who you're talking to because there could be German spies around.
Yeah.
You know, it was very common for that sort of thing. There was a lot of secret squirrel stuff going on, and you know, particularly near villages and stuff like that. And you only need some farmer to talk to somebody that they don't know, going, "Oh yeah, the military, they're doing big manoeuvres over on such and such more." That gets back to the Germans through German spy. It was the spy network. We go into the spy network comes more into it in this now as well. There's a film I've just watched really recently, which was 6 Seconds Till Midnight, which was about the Secret Service and spying and how even within our own ranks, people were very, very suspicious of each other. Great film, guys. Go check that out. Now, they've been watching Helen for quite a while. They've been placing policemen in the audience, you know, in the seance audience. We've got D-Day in full swing, so there's planning going on. A lot of, manoeuvres being done around the country, particularly in this area. So we could not, there's no way we could let that get out in any way, shape or form.
No.
Whether she's
You've
fake
got
or not, you can't even let a rumour get out on this one.
especially she was actually doing these seances in Portsmouth, and that is a highly sensitive area in itself, and it would have been a
Yeah.
military town. It's got the naval port there. Yeah, you can't have rumours. Well, that and the authorities would have probably had enough to deal with rumours anyway, without a spiritualist medium coming in on the scene.
Exactly, and because of, one thing that they did do about D-Day, the prep work, they planted a lot of false information. The Germans weren't expecting the raid that they got. They thought it was going to hit somewhere else, and to where it did hit eventually.
Yeah.
So we were very successful in that, and part of that was because they were very, very controlling about and secret about the preparation work for it. There was a lot of things that they sort of let slip to the Germans. False news in full swing. So the Germans are finding out information about our alleged D-Day, when in actual fact the real D-Day was something completely different. There was a lot of that had gone on, and it was very, very successful in that. So they had no room for manoeuvre in that, and rumours could not get out. So in January 19th, 1944, the police actually raided Helen's seance, and they arrested her and charged her under the Vagrancy Act of 1824. Now, this particular act is a catch-all preemptive crime control measure. So they can basically arrest you for Vagrancy Act.
Yeah, whilst they investigate further, isn't it?
Yeah, while they do that. Now, this is how famous she is at this point. BBC Radio stopped talking about the Russian advance on the Eastern Front to report on her arrest.
Oh, right.
Right? So,
Is that right?
bottom line is, they wanted to stop her from working. They just wanted her to shut up and be quiet. That's what you need to do, Helen Duncan, because what we've actually arrested you for is actually a misdemeanour.
Yeah.
Right? The police went so far as to ask the court to have her remanded to jail, which was very unusual considering it was a very minor charge.
Yeah, misdemeanour. Yeah, it was sort of. Yeah, they would sort of just bail you over to appear in court at a later date, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. So they actually put her in jail for 4 days in quite a nasty little jail in Portsmouth area, right? Now they had to shut her up somehow. They worried the Vagrancy Act wouldn't do the job of putting her out of business, so the authorities reached into the past for a charge that would lead to a trial. So all of this focuses on her being a fraud, or, doing something she shouldn't, to basically keep her in prison and keep their eye on her and keep her mouth shut. So they actually turned to an old act called the Witchcraft Act of 1735. And this act actually makes it illegal to claim to possess magical powers, mediumship being one of those.
Right.
Which is why these days, any medium, any reading, you have to put out a disclaimer that it's for entertainment purposes only.
Yeah.
Because this act is still valid.
Right.
Now, the raid on the seance hadn't actually proved any physical evidence, right? So they couldn't prosecute her because they hadn't got any physical evidence, right?
Just all circumstantial.
Exactly. It was only on, witness testimony, basically.
Yeah.
They reckon that the fellow spiritualists had actually got rid of all the ectoplasm and ghostly materials, so they couldn't prove that she was doing anything, even fake, because there was no proof of that.
Right.
So the defence for Helen focused on demonstrating that her mystical talents were actually real. The defence produced 49 witnesses who all attested that Helen had indeed contacted and brought forward the spirits of family and friends.
Oh, right. So she's got quite a sort of like hardcore of believers behind her and people willing to go and testify then.
Yeah. Yeah, she's got a firm fan base, shall we say.
Yeah.
Now, Chief Constable Arthur West was the prosecutor for the Crown, declared she attempted and succeeded in deluding confirmed believers of spiritualism. She has tricked, defrauded and preyed upon the minds of certain credulous sections of the public.
Right.
Now, the prosecution only put up 5 witnesses, and these also introduced the photographs, the famous photographs that was taken nearly 20 years earlier. about the ectoplasm.
Yeah.
That proved
So
that was fake.
So it did go against her then.
Well, the judge, Sir Gerald Dobson, was very amused at various points during the trial. Now, West had, Chief Constable West he'd been wanting to take down Hellish Nell for a long time. It's a mouthy woman. It's a bit like, do you remember we talked last week about on the Highwayman show, Fielding wanted to take down, This is a bit like that scenario. He reminded the judge of the seriousness of the charge and said, in 1941, Mrs. Duncan transgressed the security laws and said she is an unmitigated humbug and a pest.
Dun, dun, dun.
You can almost feel his frustration in that comment.
You can, can't you?
Yeah. It was a 7-day trial, and the judge ruled that Helen had exploited those who had come to her for help. So he then sentenced her for 9 months imprisonment.
Oh, right.
Helen fainted at the news.
So could she not have got around that by saying it's actually God that gives me those messages? Because then it's down to the court to prove that God doesn't exist.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
That's a compelling argument, isn't it?
Might be, yeah. I don't know, to be quite honest.
I don't think that would wash. It's not God giving the messages, is it? It's the person. And you're not giving messages from God, you're giving messages from deceased people.
No one but Helen knows where these messages are coming from. So if she turned around and said, these messages are coming from God...
She's already attested, though, that they've come from people's loved ones, not God. So that
through God, then?
No, because it's not through God. She's saying... This person has come to me and is telling me this and is telling you. So me saying to you, my nan's come to me and or your nan's coming to me and giving me a message for you, Paul, and then going into court and saying it was God, and you'll go, well, no, hang on, you said it was my nan.
Yeah, through God.
No, it doesn't work that way.
It wouldn't cut the mustard.
No, I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't get away with that.
I don't know. You court it'd be done in the court to prove God don't exist. And I can't see any court in the world that are doing that.
But I don't think that would ever be allowed to be used as defence, because you have to put your case forward before the trial even starts, don't you?
Yeah.
That wouldn't even get into a courtroom.
It wouldn't be allowed. It wouldn't get in a courtroom.
Because, as I say,
certain criminals have used that before, that God. I mean, some quite serious, nasty serial killers have used that. Peter Sutcliffe, for one, and they didn't, he was still convicted on being a nasty piece of work.
Well, he was. I mean,
Yeah, well, anyway.
Anyway, she spent just 6 months in prison and did promise to stop holding seances after she was released. Didn't really keep to that promise, though, because she started up her work again. And in 1956, the police arrested her again during another raid. Now, they were actually forced to immediately release her because their search failed to produce any material evidence. Right? So that's good news. Can't prove it. But the pressure's off now. We're in 1956. They're not so worried about it. They don't like it, but the war's done.
The war's over. I suppose the Cold War's going on. I suppose they might be a bit concerned. But, yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. So, on this one, it's a bit like she's an irritant and she might be defrauding people, but it's not, the pressure's not there like it was before. 6 weeks later, at the age of 59, she died a natural death.
Right, there you go.
Now, so let's have a look at how she might have known about the Barham sinking. This is the one that really sort of was the end of, that caused a lot of her problems. Now, they don't really know. Nobody's really certain. However, there are estimates that show between military personnel and families of the sailors on board, plus the sailors who survived the sinking, that around 20,000 people may have had knowledge of the attack before the Royal Navy officially acknowledged it.
Yes, I mean, you would have had the ships around, would have seen it, and everyone of all them ships knowing about it. that would have made it to shore. You know, yeah, I can see that.
They could have watched a video on YouTube.
Now, so keeping such a huge secret is going to be impossible. They can only control that to a certain degree, but people do talk.
Yeah.
Now, in addition, there are several conflicting accounts of the 1941 seance. Some in attendance said that Helen mentioned the Barham by name, while others said that she had not named any particular ship. And others believed that somehow she had managed to coax the ship's name from the poor mother.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
2 or 3 sort of scenarios there. I always thought she named Barham in, but that was just for a TV show I watched. But yeah,
I think it depends on the account of who you look at with this one, because say there are conflicting accounts of this.
And let's face it, I mean, that is a technique known by sort of, not so reputed mediums, is to coax information out of desperate people, isn't it?
Not
well, you
always.
get that even now with like on stage mediums. They're always accused of having stooges in the foyer out the front, where they can actually mingle and talk to the crowd before the show and gather information that way. She could have done that.
There's a lot of could have, should have, maybes,
It's
whatnot.
too sophisticated. I think Helen Duncan's more or less sort of, she was what she was. I mean, I don't think she was possibly that clever to have a network of stooges and all that sort of stuff. It does sort of seem she just relied on.
She could have just done it herself before the show, just mingled a bit.
I don't know. That's pure speculation. We don't know. We'll never know that, will we?
No. And also, it's amazing. You'd be surprised at how much information you do give out without realising it.
Yeah. You don't realise this woman who the message was directed at. She could have just blurted out, and that's my son, and he's on the Barham.
HMS Barham, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't know. Now, whatever way, this is a difficult one because we have this even today with there's a famous account of Derek Acorah was called out on a very famous television show, famously sacked for that because apparently he was fake. But you've got still huge amount of supporters who swear by Derek's ability. Helen is another one of these. People swear by them. Her supporters and grandchildren are still actively working to clear her name, saying she was a true mystic, a true spiritualist.
What did it for Derek Acorah on this particular TV show was when they were looking for Dick Turpin, and they found Dick Turpin's Mrs. Mary because she loved Dick.
Well, it's just funny. I don't know about anything else. I think it was
that sort of when his career started to go downhill.
Oh, that was hysterical. It's all I
but
can say.
As you're right. I mean, there are a lot of, even now that he's passed, there's still a lot of people that hold him in high regard.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so on that.
He'll never be forgotten.
Oh, bless him.
Even for that Mary comment, he'll always be remembered.
Yes, he will. Anyway, on that note, we've actually come to the end of the first half. Whether she was a true mystic or not, we'll never know. But her name has gone down in history, not just for this particular instance of being, put in prison for the Witchcraft Act in World War II, but also the famous ectoplasm photographs. I think that is one that is just phenomenal to look at. It's a very interesting case. Harry Price was involved in that. If you need to go and have it, I would say go and have a look at it, because that account in itself is hysterical when you think about it. We've covered that before now on a previous show. So go away, have a look at that one. We're going to have a look at further paranormal accounts in the second half after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
Welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. So,
Yeah, you got it right this week.
yeah, I know, I've been practicing.
Well done.
Are you
You've been
proud of
practicing.
me?
I am very well done.
Little glow of
Gold
happiness
stars in
looking
the
at-
post.
Yay.
Oh, right, yeah. We like that.
Right, so that was the case really of Helen Duncan, and she's a very controversial figure in regards to paranormal and stuff like that, really. But the next thing we're going to have a look at is another interesting one. This is very reminiscent of another account, but it's totally different.
Yeah, it's reminiscent. And I understand what you're saying there, Kerry. It's reminiscent of another account, but again, totally different.
Yeah.
And how does that work?
You'll find out when we get deep into it. Now,
It's the same but different.
it's the same but different.
Yeah.
Now, the case is actually reported by two English women on holiday in Puys near Dieppe. This happened in 1951 and was in the summer, so it's late July, early August, right?
Yep.
The women, they're identified in reports as Dorothy Norton and her sister-in-law Agnes Norton.
Right.
Right, now, they stayed in a house that during World War II had been occupied by German soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so this house has got history.
Yeah.
Now, Dorothy was also accompanied by her two children and a nurse. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Now, remember, this is in 1951. On August the 4th, at about 4:20, the women were awakened by loud noises. They started suddenly and sounded a bit like a storm, right, arising at the sea. The sounds came and went, but they could hear distinct sounds of gunfire, shellfire, dive bombers, men shouting and crying out. So the women got up and went out onto their balcony. They don't know what the hell is going on, right? They can't actually see, but they couldn't see the actual sea. So there was nothing to account for the noises. So there's nothing, they're not seeing anything to back up what they're hearing.
Right.
Now, the noises came in the direction of the sea, but they couldn't actually see the sea. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was loud, it was intense. Still seemed like gunfire, bombing, voices shouting, and it had stopped really quickly at 4:50. So it's quite a long time that had gone on for.
Yeah.
It started again at 5:07.
Right.
Right? It was so loud that the women were amazed that the other occupants of the house weren't awake because it was that loud.
Yeah.
Right? Oh dear. Now, dawn breaks and they hear a rifle shot on the beach below them. Right? The noise becomes more distinct, and again the sound of dive bombing planes came in waves, and that stopped again abruptly at 5:40. At 5:50, it's not as loud, but still very distinct, the sound of planes. The noise goes away at 6 a.m, resumes again at 6:20, a lot fainter. Then after 6:55 a.m, they didn't hear any more. So this is quite an throughout the evening, early morning kind of scenario.
Yes, it seems to be the early morning. I mean, the time pattern seems to concur as well to the actual Dieppe raid itself, because just slightly down the coast from where the women were staying was the port of Dieppe, and there was a raid there during World War II back in 1942. It was not it was nothing to do with D-Day. It happened about 2 years before, but the Allies wanted to see if they could seize a port, and it was a raid in force. They sort of went there, sort of assault the beach. They wanted to secure the town whilst commandos sort of went inland, and there was a couple of radar installations they needed to sort of like destroy and hopefully bring back intelligence from. So this whole Dieppe raid, it didn't go quite as they planned. People were landed on the wrong beach and stuff, and the Germans did mount a very strong counter-attack, and they managed to sort of like kill the raid and pretty much did. It was quite a disaster for the Allies. And it's interesting, and I do find this account interesting because, why just the two women that heard it and no one else?
No idea. Well, they knew that the girls, the ladies, the women, they knew that the battle had taken place in the vicinity during the war, but they didn't really know the details. They consulted a French guidebook, and during the experience sat and read the account of the battle. So they kind of were thinking that this is what they were hearing, but they didn't know the details of the battle, if that makes sense. They then decided to write independent versions of their experience, of what they'd heard. Now, there is a slight discrepancy in time, but you've also got to understand their watches might have been slightly different, but generally their reports matched. Now, they also asked several other people if they'd heard what they had heard during the night, and they didn't hear any. Nobody heard anything. It was only them two.
Yeah. Could it have been more like a time slip or time fracture, and they were in the say, for example, a time slip would then give off some sort of field. If they stood in that field, they could hear what was going on, where others wouldn't. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm certainly sort of like, I'm with you, Paul. I'm going down more of the road at some sort of a time slip, considering that only affected them too. Yes.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
It is a strange one. Because when you compare what they say they experienced and the phases of the Dieppe raid, there were consistencies between the times and the noises they heard. So, like in the first one, it was like gunfire, shelling, planes, all of that was going on. And then towards the end, it just ended up being the plane noises, didn't it?
You've got battles, despite sort of what you see on TV and stuff, they're not continuous. They sort of ebb and flow. So you will get sort of heights of sort of intense combat, and then it will die down, and then and then it will sort of flare up again. So what they're talking and what they say they witnessed, sort of heard, does seem to fit that premise of a battle.
And as I say, from what they've written down and what we know of the actual battle, it does seem to match. It does show consistency with the noises that they heard. There's a few exceptions in that, but generally it is very good. And the information in the guidebook that they read about the battle was actually not specific enough to have given them like a psychological prompt as to what they heard, if that makes sense. So what they read, you wouldn't have gleaned that information from that account that was written in the guidebook. Okay. Now, they were interviewed by cyclical researchers G.W. Lambert and Kathleen Gray. They came across as well-balanced individuals who displayed no tendency to embellish their accounts. They didn't care about proving that they'd had a paranormal experience. Now, Dorothy said she'd been awakened by similar but fainter noises on the morning of July the 30th, but had not mentioned the experience to Agnes. So the first time she'd heard it, she didn't actually mention it at all. The second night, Agnes heard it and was woken by it too. Now, she didn't want to spoil the holiday because it's something mysterious. She was thinking, oh, God, that's a bit weird, and sort of just like left it. But then after Agnes heard it as well, they sort of like compared notes and wrote their accounts, and it was out there then.
Yeah.
Now, skeptics have looked at this. Good old skeptics, gotta love a skeptic. Now, they propose that what they may have experienced was surf sounds, the sounds of the water,
Yeah.
noise from commercial airplanes flying a nearby route across the English Channel, or noise from a dredger.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Agnes Norton actually served in the Royal Navy service during the war. So, yeah, you think she'd be able to tell
Yeah.
what she's hearing. You think she'd be able to tell between the sound of a single commercial aircraft or a sound of a sea.
Yeah.
You know, she's got experience. She's not stupid. And the dredger that was allegedly said to have caused these noises was actually not in operation at the times, according to, at the times of the experience.
Right. Yeah. Plus the noise level. They said, they and even they were surprised that nobody else was up, sort of experiencing what they were experiencing.
Yeah, if it was that noisy, you'd think
Yeah.
other people would have heard it.
Mm.
Now, both women were familiar with the Versailles. That's it. Got there eventually. Goodness me. Now, that time slip is a famous account of two women on holiday in France and basically felt that they'd time slipped into Marie Antoinette's time at Versailles, right? That's a very familiar story that we all know and love in the paranormal as well. And is quoted quite openly in regards to time slips.
Yeah.
Now, skeptics have also suggested that the familiarity with that account has primed the Nortons psychologically to have their own experience.
Yeah.
That would make sense if they knew in depth about the Dieppe battle. But they didn't.
Yeah.
No.
But then again, we've only got their word for it that they didn't.
Yeah, they certainly, and if the reporting's right, I mean, it seems they weren't particularly bothered if they were believed or not.
No,
Yeah.
it was basically, well, we had this account, we wrote it down, make of it what you will.
Yeah.
We're not really caring about proving paranormal activity. We're just saying we had this experience.
Yeah.
Up to you to make your decision as what you think that may well have been. I find this one incredibly interesting. I find time slips one of the most interesting because, first of all, you can't prove it. You are listening just purely to somebody's face value account of what they experienced. The Versailles one, the Dieppe one. There are other accounts as well. We talked about the pilot.
There's one of the there's one with the hotel which the couple stay in whilst travelling through France, wasn't it? And that is relatively recently, isn't it? Back in the 1980s.
Yeah. So you've
Wasn't
got
there a calf one as well?
Yeah.
It's a calf.
And I've even got people, like, nowadays have had experiences of time slips themselves, like Mr. Ward himself, not Steve Ward on the station, a different Steve Ward, Andy Mercer's friend, had an account, bought some books,
Oh, right.
went and had an Indian in an Indian restaurant, left the books behind by mistake, went 2 or 3 streets and went, oh, my books, better go back to the restaurant, went to the restaurant, nothing there. It was warehouses, boarded up warehouses.
Yeah, I've heard that.
He went in, nothing, no Indian restaurant. Yeah, he said it was a fantastic meal that they had eaten. Him and his girlfriend, that was them 2 people again, experiencing something called a time slip.
Did you have an experience something along similar lines, Paul? I remember you talking about once.
I did, but I don't know whether it was a premonition or a time slip. But I was at a friend's house and they said they were going to take me to work, but they had to nip to their mum's first. So I stayed at their house and I heard them pull up outside and I came out and see who it was, and it was my mate. And I said, I'll be 5 minutes. I'll just get in the stuff. So I went and done that. And then my friend rang me and said, I'm round the corner. Be ready. And I'm like, you're already outside. I just spoke to you. And she's like, no, I wasn't. I'm not. I'm 2 minutes down the road. I'm like, no, you're outside. Don't lie to me.
Again,
Yeah.
yeah, they're interesting accounts. They sort of seem to they have a place of their own within the paranormal field. But it's how do you recreate them, or how do you sort of like investigate them, because they are literally you've only got the experience as testimony, really, and haven't you?
I think if say for example someone has an experience in a field, for example, say a battlefield, they go to a battlefield and they have an experience, and then more people go and have more experiences. The only thing that you can theorize that there could be some sort of time fracture there, and you could go there and test the field and see if there's any anomalies with different energies and stuff, and just see whether or not one day you're lucky enough to hit that anomaly,
and hit it at the right time.
Yeah, that would be the only way. And if you were to do the recording of your evidence and stuff, you'd eventually pick it up, wouldn't you? Hopefully.
Yeah. They certainly make a fascinating reading, as I say. I'm familiar. I think with the Versailles one, they actually visually sort of saw, wasn't it, around Marie Antoinette's little milk parlour? She had I think she had a little sort of village maid sort of to the side, didn't she? And a couple of women had experiences in there, sort of actually sort of seeing and speaking to people.
Yeah, both interesting accounts. That's all you can say.
Not as good as mine.
Yeah, that's all you can say about that one, really.
Yeah.
Now, they're moving on from that because, time slips are a completely different scenario. And like you say, other than reading the accounts, there's not a lot else you can do, really. Now, we have a lot of ghostly encounters with planes, ghost planes.
You do. There's a location not very far away from you, Kerry, that you've investigated on one of your birthdays.
Rotham Tower.
That has,
Rotham Tower.
That has ghostly aeroplanes being heard.
You know what? First time I investigated that, we were out and just outside the canteen area, the hub room.
Yeah.
We were called. It was just outside there, and we had played Vera Lynn. We'll meet again, kind of thing, as a kind of trigger type thing. And I was hearing a bomber, and it wasn't a Spitfire; it was a bomber.
Yeah.
And I could hear it, and I was going. When we was doing it, I was working, and I was going. It's coming in low. It's coming in fast. It's coming in at this angle. On this airfield, which wasn't the airfield that's there now. This is just a field. I'm going, this is an airfield. This is a flight where they land the planes. Landing strip, that's the word I'm searching for. I said, but it doesn't make it like this. It's flying. It's going to overshoot it. Anyway, after we'd finished working, we was back in the hub room, and the researcher of the time, Mark Manley, he said, he goes, there was chills. He said, when you was talking, he said, about this bomber, he goes, like, nobody else could hear this bomber, but I could. And he was going, I got chills. He said, because I think it was, and I could be wrong on what type of plane it was. I think it was a Hercules. Came in low, overshot the runway, and crashed into a pub that was like sort of in the village that was further down. He said, and it was a Canadian men on board or something. None of them survived. And if you looked at where I was saying this happened, you would never have guessed it was landing strip at the time. It was just a field. Do you know what I mean? It didn't look. And actually, where the landing field is now, everyone goes out onto that landing field when actually, in fact, I'm over on somewhere completely different, saying something completely different. He goes, he couldn't believe it. Like this, I might have got the plane wrong.
Didn't you pick up something like that at Western Zoyland as well?
Yeah, but to be fair, you could argue a skeptic even being sceptical about myself, could argue that you're World War Two. You've got like damaged and whatnot planes, inexperienced pilots coming in. The planes are a bit dodged themselves. They're not high-tech planes. Do you know what I mean? Coming in. There's going to be some crashes, some crash landings,
Absolutely.
on the landing strips and stuff like that. But it's not an uncommon occurrence, is my point.
Yeah, I can always remember my dad saying, because he lived down the road from an airfield during the war, and it was an American airfield. And in the morning, you used to see the planes go out for a raid, all taken off, all nice, all patched up and stuff. And then in the afternoon, they'll come back, and some of them, he was saying, you don't know and how the hell they were still flying. They'd have holes in the wings and everything, but it always had planes crashing short of the runway or overshooting.
So a skeptic would look at that account and go, well, it's hardly a big shock. Do you know what I mean? To that. You're also in Rotham Tower has got like museums, and one of those is like a hangar's too big a word for it. It's like a shelter, isn't it? That's got bits of planes in it, so you know that there's been plane crashes in that area. Do you know what I mean? It's not, a skeptic would argue this in that respect. All I can say is I know what I experienced when I was saying what I was saying and what I was hearing. I've had another encounter we were investigating, and I hate to say this at the moment because if people with the paranormal field hear this, they'll probably hang, draw and quarter me at dawn. We were investigating a graveyard, and I could hear a Spitfire, and I wasn't the only person that could hear it, because we were all looking up, like you're looking up at the sky, thinking, it's black, pitch black. You're looking up at the sky going, I can hear a Spitfire. Because the Spitfires are distinct. You know a Spitfire from a commercial, like, little plane, a little Cessna kind of plane. They're very distinct. We all heard it. That was in one of the Basildon graveyards.
I think, could that have been around the time of an air show?
No, it was late at night. They wouldn't have been flying at that time of night.
Because I know near to the air shows, they do fly over occasionally, don't they? That particular area.
Yeah, we get them quite often flying over Canvey, because they fly into Southend, and from Southend they can get to lots of different air shows, as it were, like the Clacton areas and stuff like that. And so if they're moving a plane, they will move them to like a more local airfield. So if it had been more where I lived at my end, that's exactly what I would have thought. Yeah. They're moving the plane for an air show that's going on. But Basildon, no. I wouldn't have said so. And at the time of night it was as well. They tend to do the World War, when they're moving planes, they tend to do those during the day.
Yeah. Because they're vintage aircraft, and they don't want them flying around at night because of the extra risk. You want to keep the ones you've got. So I should imagine it's all daytime flying they do, regardless.
So it was unusual. I wouldn't say it proves paranormal activity at all. It was just a strange encounter on that. But we all heard it. It wasn't just me hearing that one. We all heard it. But they are one, ghost planes are definitely one of the most...
Oh, definitely.
Biggest stories to come out of World War II. I mean, we do hear a lot of these stories about ghost planes. Planes that couldn't possibly be, and people still report seeing and hearing them. Now, some of them, those are explained through daytime, the ones in the daytime, moving aircraft, blah blah blah. You can, and now you can check. There are apps you can check where planes are flying. You can, they're quite open about moving. Your logic would say if there's an air show coming up in the next week or so, the chances are it was moving to an airfield closer, and there are experiences now where people can be taken up in kind of like vintage planes, so there are explanations for this, but there are some that do sort of stretch that. They do sort of defy that explanation.
Yeah.
Now, there is an area called Dark Peak. Now, this is known for being a location of more than 50 plane crashes over the years. Right. One such plane was spotted over England. Now, you can't say, again, we reiterate time and time again that people put too much on the traumatic, the paranormal experience due to something being traumatic. So we talked about this in regards to World War One. You know, you can't always put it down to that. Yes, in that instance, that's your kind of like your assumption. Well, these men are like being traumatized and blah blah blah, but people, we said on that show, people have experiences without that traumatic express. Well, this is another one. Because in 2015, a World War II plane was seen flying over the Dark Peak area, which is actually in northern Derbyshire. It is known for these kind of sightings, these ghost aircraft sightings.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, you know, when you see something that, that physically can't have a traumatic experience like an airplane, you know.
Yeah, just living your life. You hear a plane, you look up and, oh my God, do you know what I mean? Look at that. It's happened in 2015. A World War II bomber plane was seen flying over the area by several witnesses. It's not just one person witnessing this, several people witnessed this. It was identified by former RAF pilots as a Lancaster, which is a 4-engine heavy bomber that was used during the RAF during the war. However, I would say another pilot did disagree and thought it was a Liberator, which is a smaller 4-engine bomber that was used by the Americans, and a witness agreed that it was too small to be a Lancaster.
Right, yeah,
Right?
so, but they've got, you know, the basics, right, you know, it's a 4-engine plane, and, and a Liberator and a Lancaster, could be mistaken to the untrained eye, but,
Now, the plane never landed. There's no record of any scheduled flights of historical aircraft. And it is also noted that the plane was silent as it flew. Now, if you know the sound of these planes, you would know how loud the Lancaster or the Liberator is.
oh yeah, you know,
But
you
these
know
are
they're
not
coming.
quiet planes.
Not like these days.
I mean, even planes these days, or even if they're high, you can hear it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, some of the jets, the modern jets, you don't necessarily hear before, you hear after. Like, I'm thinking of the Aurora and things like that. Oh, I'm not great on modern planes, to be fair, but you can generally hear a plane. You know a jet when it's coming, don't you?
Yeah, you can hear them normally.
Now, the bomber isn't the only ghost plane to be seen in this area. In 2017, more reports of ghost plane sightings surfaced. Now, several people reported seeing a Douglas Dakota. Now, this was a plane that was flown during World War II by the RAF, and there are no more in operation. So, this Dakota plane, you ain't going to see one going to an air show because there are no more.
Because they're no more, yeah.
Yeah. One witness said something looked wrong with the plane and it seemed to be flying straight towards them. And the witness said that the plane turned sideways, then vanished without a trace. Now, historical records did confirm that a Douglas Dakota crashed in the area of the sightings in the 1940s.
There you go.
So people are still witnessing this.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me about this is that very often we talk about a haunting or a ghost is a person. When we come to ghosts of mechanical objects,
Yeah.
that's a different ballgame completely, isn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, just by the very nature of it, or unless, you know, unless there's the actual ghost of the crew inside that is sort of manifesting the plane around them. That's the only other way I could think of it happening. You know, sort of...
They're reliving that moment.
yeah, you know, which isn't that far of a stretch, I should imagine. We do believe... well, there's certainly a large proportion of people do believe that objects hold energy, a mechanical aircraft, and at the end of the day, is an object, isn't it?
But it's not a physical object, is it?
Would that then suggest that when a house is knocked down and the ghost still haunts that particular house, they can manifest their house?
Well, there
have been reports of phantom houses sort of cropping up in woods and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, but the last ones to report that were Hansel and Gretel.
But when we talk about ghosts, they passing through walls, we say that that's where an old doorway was. If you look at old plans of the house,
yeah,
yeah, but you don't see the doorway.
You don't see the doorway, but they do.
No.
Yeah.
So they're sort of like living in the time that they knew the house or building. Yeah. So they're still following the same path they would have followed if the house was originally, as it was originally.
So then, could there still? I know, Kerry, you're not a big fan of it, but could there still be some sort of merit in the stone tape theory? Although it's not, we're not looking at stone tape, stone in particular. Maybe there's some sort of other element that has that effect.
I don't discount that there is a possibility of a variety of factors that would possibly be able to create recording. I don't think it's water. I don't believe it's stone. I think it's a combination of elements that would cause that to happen. You have to look at how something could possibly get recorded, where it's stored, what would trigger the recording to replay. That's what you'd have to do. And I think it would be more beyond a simple explanation of, oh, it's the stone in the area, oh, it's the water in the area. It's just, I think if you were to do it, you would have to look at a multiple factor of combinations.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It's just that we don't understand that at this moment in time.
Correct. And no one's compiled the data that would be needed to even begin to see a possibility of a pattern in regards to, I don't know, you would even have to look at things like the stuff that comes off the sun that causes differences in our our atmosphere.
Oh,
the impulses.
Yeah, sort of solar flares and stuff.
You would have to look
that.
at all those levels to gain a possibility of a pattern.
Yeah.
You would even have to look at, where, because if you look at a recording of something, of how we would record something now, and just take it as audio, forget video for now, but let's just look at how you would record audio. Yeah. You would have to look at how we manufacture that and then see if you could find a natural occurrence that may possibly cause the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in nature.
See, that again, that wouldn't be difficult because when we record things to tape, it's done by magnetics, isn't it?
Vibration and magnetics, yeah.
Yeah, so you get those in natural occurrences. So it should, in theory, be able to easily be recreated.
But what's it recording onto, and why? Where is it being stored? And then what is the mechanism that triggers the replay?
Oh, I don't know. I've only just thought of that bit.
Trust me, I've been going down that rabbit hole for quite a few years. Trust me on that one. It is a big, deep rabbit hole that's going to take more research than my little patience has got time for. But that's my argument.
It gets recorded in your little crystals.
If it could get, and this is where the crystal comes in, right?
Yeah, and that's what, when you touch your crystals and you get the vibrations, that's the vibration playing out. Yeah, sorted it.
Except for ghost planes that are flying in the air, there are no crystals in the air.
That's not technically correct either, is it, really?
If you tell me there's ice crystals in the air, I'm going to kick you. Because that's just water.
No, but there is. There's water in the air, isn't there? There's water in the air. There's water in the clouds. Essentially, that's what they're made of.
And I'm not saying water isn't a fundamental part of it. I just don't think it's... Like, everyone goes, oh, it's water memory. It's not.
Yeah, but there's lots of stuff in our air, in the air, chemically wise, that it could, and it's all atoms and stuff, and we're talking microbiology now.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not a
So there's all
possibility.
sorts.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
I'm not. I won't discount the stone tape kind of theory, the recording of an incident. I won't discount it.
No, what I'm saying is it works on that sort of principle, but it isn't actually about stone. It's something else.
It is, but I
That's
think
what.
even things that happen on, like, where we say, like in a house, for example, the stone tape theory, I think even that, there's something bigger at play than it just being recorded in the
Oh,
fabric of the building, but or the crystal in
absolutely.
the area or the water source that's there. I think it is a combination of if it is a possibility, I won't discount that possibility, but I think
Well, I
you would
think
have to do a
when
hell
they,
of a lot of data collection
I
to
think
gain
when
a
they come up
pattern.
when they come up with the stone tape theory, I think they were just looking at houses and castles and the fact that they are actually built of stone. So that's the only thing that surrounds the area that's haunted, if that makes sense.
Oh no,
So that's where they
totally.
come from. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That's exactly where it come from. That thought that the fabric of a building can record an incident and then replay it, which is we talk about that with recurrent ghosts. Residual
Yeah.
energy. When we've talked about haunted objects, we've talked about the object itself holding energy. And again, I won't discount that. As I say, this is a rabbit
Yeah.
hole I've been delving down into for a lot of years. I dip in and out of it, and but the work that would need to be done to form any chance of a pattern, you'd have to look at millions of factors for it, and a lot of those factors you wouldn't be able to recreate because it's evolving and changing and constantly in flux, because you're talking
Yeah.
natural elements.
And I've
So
debunked it.
unless you were there right at that moment taking all those readings that you needed, you would never be able to prove it. I don't think, anyway. But maybe somebody cleverer than me will be able to. Who knows?
Well, I've done it in the show. Sorted.
Okay. So anyway, but no, it might well be the crew members are reliving that experience themselves. Who knows what that is?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Of the Douglas Dakota, you don't know, do you? We say it's a mechanical object. It's not an object holding energy because the object isn't real. It's not tangible.
No, it's not tangible object. No, but
It's a
yeah.
ghost. So that, but no explanation fits every ghostly paranormal occurrence.
No, that's true.
What explains one will discount, I don't know, poltergeist activity. What explains maybe possibly poltergeist activity would discount a haunting that you have on a Gettysburg. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is never, when you look at it coldly, no one size fits all. It's that's what makes the paranormal so interesting, right?
Oh, definitely.
Well, definitely, and when these occurrences happen, they are rare. They're not as common as what we like to think they are.
No, this is true, because generally it happens to the most unsuspecting person rather than the ghost
Yeah.
hunter team that are out searching for it,
Yeah, that's right.
no matter what people say. Right, let's have a look at the B-17. This has happened in November in 1944. An anti-aircraft crew stationed in Belgium saw a large plane coming towards them. The RAF unit recognised the plane as an American B-17. Now, these were also known as the Flying Fortresses. These are big, bulky babies, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Strange sight. The landing gear is down. The plane was coming in fast, but there are no landings that are scheduled, because even then you had to clear it with like flight your tower.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't just like take off and land willy nilly, right? So the men on the ground assumed that the plane was making an emergency landing. Now they were right, but not what they expected. The plane landed fine. It was a bit bouncy, bit rough landing, but it was all right. Clear that something was wrong, because as the plane came down, it clipped a wing and then came to a stop in an open field. At this point, they expected the crew to jump out. They didn't. 20 minutes, they're watching this plane thinking, what's going on? Where's the crew? What's happening?
Yeah.
So they then decide that they better go and have a look. Better go and see what's going on, right? Now, bearing in mind, this is a situation. They're not expecting a plane to come in. They're not expecting a landing. There's nothing scheduled. So this is all a bit bizarre, right?
Yep.
Particularly with no sign of any crew, right? And the engines are still going. They're still growling away as they were. So the plane hasn't turned itself off. Right. So they decide, right, okay, we're going to go and open the hatch. We're going to go and into the plane, find out what's going on. So they opened the hatch. Now, it's empty. There's no crew. Not a single person was found on the plane. There was evidence that a crew had been on the plane recently. There was a half-eaten candy bar, a navigator's code book with colours of the day, which suggested they'd been on board that very day. Mm-hmm. And there was even neatly packaged parachutes, enough for the entire crew, completely untouched, on the plane. So it looked as if this plane has landed itself, no crew. It's a bit like the Mary Celeste of the aircraft world, isn't it?
That is strange.
Right.
Okay, so this is a very weird one. Now, this, of course, you can imagine that this ghost story or this story of this plane spread like wildfire through the military. So they had to do a lot of research on this one because they had to explain it because it freaked everybody out on airfields far and wide. Now, what had actually happened is the plane had actually malfunctioned, taken a hit, which made the plane unable to fly. So the crew got rid of anything they could to lighten the load, then they'd bailed out of the plane. On that one, I do ask, how did they bail out of the plane if they hadn't used the parachutes?
Well, in fact, I've come across this story several times, and I've often wondered that.
And to be fair, if you're going to lighten the load, you're lightening the load of everything that you can possibly chuck out. That would include a candy bar.
Guns.
Yeah.
It would include a lot of other stuff that was found on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have questions on this, is all I would say on that one. So the B-17 dipped down towards Brussels. The problem with the planes resolved itself magically. The B-17 flew itself. It was on the right path to get to the Belgium airfield. Coincidence that it just happened to, stay there and land in front of this RAF crew. Pure coincidence. That sounds like a big ball of crap to me. There's so many questions I've got on that one. It's untrue.
Act of God.
There are accounts where they actually do track down the crew as well. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I will certainly go and try and track down the actual full account of this story, because it is sort of, it is quoted in military sort of circles as well, and even to this day. So it's not just sort of like the paranormal world sort of know about this. It is actually sort of still sort of talked about and written about today.
But
it's an odd one.
It is an odd one. I have many questions, is all I can say on that one. But there you go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Bovington Tank Museum that's located in Dorset.
Ah, good old Bovington. Used to go there a lot when I was a little nipper. Used to holiday in Swanage. That's down in Dorset, and no holiday would have been complete down there without a visit to Bovington Tank Museum.
Oh, this is why you've included this one, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is the one, yeah.
Bless you. There are over 300 tanks from over 26 countries, and even includes a British World War I Mark I, which is actually the oldest surviving combat tank. So, folks, if you like tanks, the Bovington Tank Museum is the one you need to go to. Oh, yeah.
Full of tanks, yeah. We're going to have to go there one day. Have a road trip to the Tank Museum.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, that's one for the lads, I feel.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I have no wanting to go to a tank museum in my entire life. However, one of the best known and well-known hauntings actually happens at the Bovington Tank Museum. Now, this is the story of a ghost who has been dubbed Herman the German. He is supposed to haunt the Tiger 131 tank. Now, the tank is a German Tiger. It's heavy. It was captured by the British during World War II. It is the only operating Tiger in the world today, so it's the last one. And the story surrounding the haunted status of this tank basically goes back to when they first brought the tank to the museum, and they found, allegedly, the body of a German soldier inside.
That's a bit far-fetched, but yeah.
Every night there are rumours of a bloody, ghostly hand reaching out from the turret and sounds of screams from within the tank. Oh my God, how amazing!
You've got to love a story like that.
You've got to love a story like that, right?
Yeah.
Now, if that was the case, this happens every night.
Yep. Cool.
Well,
Except the
Paranormal
night you go.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Let's go. Every night I would pay money to see that. They could do an order to put this tank in the middle of an auditorium and sell tickets for like thousands of people to see this happen every night, if this was true. Now, apparently numerous workers and guests at the museum have actually reported seeing a man wearing a German World War II uniform walking around the tank. And the sightings became so common on the museum floor that the ghost was given the name Herman the German.
Well, you've got to name him, haven't you? Poor bloke. He's well attached to his tank by the sounds of it.
Or it's a story that museum curators have made up. Now, it was not unusual for artefacts to disappear from the museum, right?
Right.
Now, it could be a story that was made up to protect the museum.
Yeah.
Right? So, scare people away, basically. Mm-hmm. Don't come here. We have a German, the Herman the German, even ghostly encounter, very scary. Don't come in here, kind of thing. So it might have been one of those. Now, in older, when this first hit the museum, I don't know. I'd like to know. Well, now that's like a beacon of light to anybody that wants a paranormal experience, quite frankly. But when the story first was made up, I'd like to know when that tank arrived at the museum and when that story may have first occurred. Yeah. Because there is a possibility, because we've come across this before in regard to Woodchester. This ghost story was made up by the contractors to keep people away whilst they were doing work on it. And it worked. People didn't go because they were scared of the ghost story. So it would depend on when that happened as to whether or not that's a relevant story.
I do know a bit of the backstory about the actual Tiger tank. It was captured in the North African desert and they brought it back. I mean, there's no way they would have kept a crew member in them before. They took it for testing and everything. So, yeah, it's that sort of thing about there was a crew member still inside is simply not true.
However, sightings still occur.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that a question of people know the ghost story and manifest the ghost story?
Well, yeah, you're in a sort of place with loads of historic artifacts again, and what better haunting than a sort of a German haunting around the German tank? Yeah, I can see it.
But then we say if you believe the theory that objects hold energy, you've got a lot of old objects in a museum, it's going to generally be haunted on some level. It's not just that area of the museum. Other areas are also reported people seeing things move, hearing footsteps, or feeling like they're being watched is a common one in that particular museum. Mm-hmm. But again, do they hire the museum out for paranormal investigation, one wonders?
I don't know, to be quite honest. I've never heard of it being on the circuit.
I'm sure Most Haunted did a one of their episodes there.
Oh, right.
That's probably why they don't open it to the paranormal world. Oops, did I say that out loud? I retract that statement.
Oh my lordy lord. So I'm not going to say it is or it isn't. I've never been there, so I don't know. But interesting place. It would stand to reason. Horrific things happen. I mean, tanks are awful things. If you got caught, if you was inside a tank and you got, like, it got blown up, basically, you're basically, like, fried inside.
Oh, yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah, the British Churchill tank was notorious for bursting into flames, and the Germans used to call them Tommy cookers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awful.
not nice for being in a tank back then.
No. So, yeah. Maybe they did, when they captured it, find a dead German inside it. They just brought that
Well, they
story
probably,
forward.
well, yeah, they probably, yeah. Or I think it was abandoned in the desert or something. Yeah, there may have been a dead German inside. Just pull them out. Yeah, but no, I mean, it's just they certainly did discover him at a later date.
I don't know. But the story of something being haunted has been used before to keep people away from something, you know.
Mhm.
So that bit doesn't surprise me at all. Let's talk about the Clark Hospital in the Philippines. Now, this has been the site of so many hauntings. It is actually considered to be one of the most haunted places in the world. It's even been featured on TV. The National Geographical featured the location as part of their I Wouldn't Go In There series because of the stories and the history. Now, this is an American Air Force base in Pampanga.
Topanga, yeah, let's have that.
From 1903 until 1991, it was still under the control of the United States Air Force. Now, much of that area is now the Clark International Airport, and the Air Force Hospital that was part of the base sits abandoned. During World War II, it was expected to be a stronghold in an upcoming war against Imperial Japan. The United States Army sent large numbers of planes to the base in order to strike against Japan, but most of those planes, oh goodness me, were destroyed in an attack that occurred just 9 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I mean the Japanese done loads of preemptive strikes. Pearl Harbor wasn't the only one on that day. They done a load of strikes around the Pacific Rim.
Yeah, they were really sneaky that day.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of their game plan, isn't it? And they're very good at it. In 1942, the base actually fell to the Japanese, and American prisoner of wars were forced to march past the gates of the base as part of the Bataan Death March. It was actually reclaimed in 1945 and served to care for American soldiers before they were sent home. It was also a base of operations during the Cold War and Vietnam War as well. Now, the hospital itself was reported to have been used as an asylum for American soldiers. Now, asylums in themselves just scream paranormal activity, don't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, just the word, isn't it?
Lights turning on and off, voices and screams echoing through the darkened halls where soldiers took their last breaths or suffered under Japanese occupation. I mean, it's just like perfect ghost story material. And to be fair, if you're going to go and investigate somewhere like that, these kind of things you lap them up. Right? After the Americans left the base, it was looted and vandalised by the locals. So that just adds to the feel of the location.
Right, yeah.
Right, it's a fave for urban explorers, is all I'm going to say on this one. Now, apparently, the ghosts that are there are not friendly ghosts.
Oh, no.
They're not friendly. Debris is reportedly thrown from nowhere. Violent screams warn any guests from exploring it. It's quite a terrifying place, apparently, this Clark Hospital. I would argue with this one, and I would say this actually, the backstory, the history of it, is horrific in itself. When you think of, if I said to you Japanese war prisoner of war camps, what would you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want to end up in one of them. They were horrific places to go to.
Straight away, that's what you've got in your head. And to be fair, China, Japan, Korea, all of those places, Vietnam, all of those kind of places, when we think prisoner of war camps, we think the worst of the worst, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Regardless of what is actually true or not. It's just one of those things that sits in our psyche. That's what we've been fed.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so straight away you've got that. You've got the fact that, you're not on known soil effectively. So if you're visiting this place, you're in a foreign country, you're not on American soil. Although it's officially American soil because it's, like it's some other country, doesn't make it American. It makes it an American base in a foreign country, right?
Yeah.
You've got a lot of factors there, and the ghost story on top, and the fact that you've got asylum stuck on there as well. It triggers a lot of things. So stories that come out of this are not going to be nice.
Of course not.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're not going to be friendly ghosts when you go there, are they?
No.
Just on that premise alone. And that's where you jump to. That's your assumption when you jump to it.
And some investigators out there jump to the conclusion demon.
#demon.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to say this is more of an urban explore than a paranormal investigation location. Obviously, it's not something we can do. It's not local to us. So it's not something we can do. It's in the Philippines at the end of the day. So, I would say this is probably a haunt of urbex explorers more than paranormal investigators, quite frankly.
Yeah.
On that note, urban exploring has been around a lot, just as long as paranormal investigating.
Yeah.
Longer.
But
maybe.
they've been those two fields have been very separate for a long time. They've not really had the crossover that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah. Well, it seems to have happened all of a sudden, doesn't it?
Mm.
Perhaps it might have been something to do with lockdown or whatever. I don't know.
Don't know, but there seems to be more of a crossover now than there ever used to be. There used to be two fields that never crossed, whereas now we seem to get a crossover. You do get urban explorers reporting strange things that happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you do get, the ones that are out there, they're there to explore the building and not damage or graffiti or do rituals or anything like that. Those sort of things tend to be done by locals.
Yeah.
Not by urban explorers or paranormal investigators. You find your local group of teenagers for a crafty night out or do something like that, guys. Do you know what I mean?
Know what you mean.
But we have got this crossover that's happening now between these locations. You have to be very, very careful in regard to law and property, who owns the property. You have to be very, very careful when you're doing urban exploring. A lot of these places are in a derelict state. If you have an accident whilst you're urban exploring, the floor gives way, the roof falls in, it's a possibility that could happen. It's dangerous.
Well, yeah.
So there's a disclaimer there. Be very, very careful. And I would say know the location, get permission from the owner if possible before you even think about it.
Mm-hmm. Some good words of advice there.
It's not something I would actually recommend, urban exploring, unless you know what you're doing.
Mm.
Having said that, I love watching urban exploring. There are some fantastic videos on YouTube of urban exploring. And this is nothing to do with paranormal. They are literally just exploring historic abandoned buildings, and they've even done some more modern ones, like hotels that have been just abandoned and stuff like that. And, some of these places are just phenomenal, and that's got nothing to do with the paranormal. They're just purely going to record what they see in these places. They're just phenomenal, and go check them out. We're trying to get a famous one for you guys to talk to them and find out all the ins and outs of urban exploring for you. But that
hopefully we will be able to get one on.
Hopefully, yeah. There's a work in progress on that one, I would say. But it is, but as I said, we have got a crossover now with the paranormal sort of side stepping into that field. And do we think that the paranormal teams are right in doing that, or is it no different from urban explorer? What do we think on that one, guys? The last few minutes of the show.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. You look at sort of standard ghost hunting. That is a type of urban exploring, because they're not actually going to catalogue or research or collect data. They're going in just to experience the place. And I can't see much difference from that than urban exploring. I'm talking location wise. So, but, mm, I can see why the paranormal have sort of edged out into urban exploring, but it sort of still remains to be seen how far this is going to go. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like it, but say la vie, just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the paranormal police are in full feckle with this one, aren't they?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely. People should be more worried about what they're doing than what others are doing.
well, of course.
Just do what you want to do, basically.
And just be careful.
Obviously within reason.
And just be careful doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as obviously you're not breaking the laws, it's fine.
Exactly. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. Any news to report, my beautiful men?
No, we still have Richard's blog on the website at paranormalconcept.com.
Yes.
We have books available as well, and the Paranormal Concept Extra book is still available on Amazon worldwide. So, yeah, there's that one. I think that's it, really.
Yeah, I think you've managed to sort of say everything that needs to be said there, Paul.
On that note, we've actually come to the end of the show.
Oh, right. That's a quick one.
It's not quick, it's 2 hours.
I know, 2 hours.
It goes so quick, though.
It does go very quick. On that note, once again, we will never forget the horrors of World War One or World War Two. We shall remember. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.